Hey guys, we're starting off on page 90. I had mixed emotions about being back in New York. On one hand, it was reassuring to have the familiar around me again. On the other, I felt that I had been defeated in some way. They made me leave St. Helena 6 months before I planned, and my garden would be going to the weeds. All the work I had put into that garden, and for what? Before I'd learned a long time ago it was no good to cry over spilled milk. I still had my health, my life even, and it was only mid-June. There were huge empty pots in my backyard, and I could still buy tomato plants to put them in. It wasn't what I had in the South, but it was better than nothing. And of course, there was my work. I could still write, and I'd been blessed with a lovely room in my apartment for doing just that. My study was my favorite room. It was painted a deep shade of gold and had built-in bookcase against one long wall. It was on the second floor of the duplex and overlooked Carroll Street. My desk was placed up against the window so I could have a full view of the street. It was almost as quiet as the road that passed my house in St. Helena. Even though 7th Avenue was 2 blocks away, that avenue stayed full of traffic and people unless you went out before 8 a.m., when only a newsstand and a coffee shop serving breakfast were open. As I unpacked my research books and arranged them on my bookcase, I thought about the issue of control. One of the hardest parts of this experience so far was that things had happened around me that I couldn't control. I had been outmanned and outgunned, with them even bringing in friends to betray me. And if they found one to betray me, I couldn't they find another? Couldn't they even get to my family? If they came into my house in St. Helena, couldn't they come into my apartment in New York? There was nothing to stop them, no laws they had to obey, no higher authority they had to answer to. I couldn't be home 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. If I went out, all they had to do was watch me and then come in to relocate a bug or camera. Or maybe for nothing more than the sake of doing it. What would I be guarding? Nothing except my space and the right to have my space without violation. The most bitter pill of all to swallow was that I couldn't guard my space effectively. All they had to do was wait. I sat down at my desk, put my head in my hands and sighed. And I began to hear the slamming. The first one or two didn't register, but when it continued like clockwork, my consciousness began to register the sound. One car pulled up, the driver would exit the car, disappear for a while, return to the car, and pull out. Within minutes, another car would take its place, and the same routine would be repeated. Slam, 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 slam. I sat at my desk for half an hour, and it continued for half an hour. At first, there was a flush of anger, and then I became very sad. I stopped asking why a long time ago. Now it was, what kind of people would do this? Didn't any of them as individuals question the insanity of all this? Or were they just blindly following orders? She's 72, and thank God the only thing that bothers her is a bit of arthritis. No, to be honest, it's a lot of arthritis. It kicks up badly on cloudy days like today. But it's her turn to be a part of the carpool, and she doesn't want to disappoint. A Dachau survivor, she became a member of the Anti-Defamation League from the moment she immigrated to America. Now she regrets that she can't give as much as she did before her husband died and left her with a small widow's pension. So when the opportunity came for her to help in another way, she jumped at it. The only thing she is told that there is a threat, and it's the only thing she needs to do to be told. She knows better than anyone what can happen if a threat is allowed to flower and grow. She left a whole family in burial pits of the German death camps, and it could happen here. It could happen anywhere. When it's her turn to go into the carpool, she goes. He's 27 and looking for a little action. He's worked on and off as an operative for the NSA since he was recruited just after college. It was most low-level stuff, like now, but he's hoping to move up in the ranks. Being in charge of the carpool is one way he can show what he's made of. He's thrilled to be directing 50 cars. 50. Just let those babies slide into that parking space on Carroll Street and slide out. He's told them he wants a good hard slam, no half-hearted crap. No, everything on his watch must go smooth silk. It's promotion time. Didn't Mr. Sullivan tell him that his idea about the car's alarms was a good one? Every 20 cars or so set off a car alarm for the target to hear. That would run anybody crazy, especially one who was trying to work at home. He's sure that his idea will get him in a memo written about his good work. Memo to the top brass would surely get him assigned to some choice jobs. But you take it a step at a time. In his case, a car at a time. Yes, a good hard slam. After a week, the boys tired of slamming car doors. They hadn't anticipated that if the witch hears the car door, so would they. Sullivan isn't driving him crazy, and Sullivan says it's driving him crazy, and he wants it to stop. It doesn't have the effect on the target that they planned. She just goes back into her bedroom to read or watch television. Surely there has to be something else they can do. It's Paolo who comes up with the idea of the drive-bys. Every time she leaves her apartment, one or two cars from the pool drive past her. Just one or two each time. On a quiet street like hers, it's sure to be noticed. Maybe not at first, but eventually Miss Take Down their license plates would begin to see a pattern, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Down in St. Helena, David had the name for that. What was it? Environmental conditioning or some shit like that. It had bothered the hell out of her in St. Helena, so there was no reason why it shouldn't work in New York. God knows here they'd have plenty of drivers to help. They are young and old, Jew and Gentile, black and white, and brown and yellow, a cornucopia of diversity that is New York. Some are in it for the cause, others for the money. They walk where they're told to walk, sit where they're told to sit, and follow where they're told to follow. Above all, they drive when they're told to drive. Turn up 7th Avenue on Carroll, proceed to the Prospect Park West, turn right. After that, they're free to go. Such a simple thing, most don't notice a lone black woman walking down Carroll, and for the few who do, it doesn't register. Most don't question what this all means, and for the few who have the courage to ask, they're told in so many words to mind their business and just do what they've signed up to do. They're part of a puzzle that's overseen by greater minds than theirs, and there is always someone to replace them if they're unhappy. Of those few who have the courage to ask, most say, most stay. I had a lot of lunches and dinners lined up when I returned to New York. Most of them were friends I'd emailed when I was down in St. Helena who wanted to see if I was all right. Two of them were men who I'd come to think of as more than friends, my editor and my agent. I'd be lucky as far as New York publishing goes to have the same editor, if not the same publishing house for my entire career. I had been with my agent for over 30 years. By being a constant in my career, these men centered me and made me feel safe. I knew there was always someone watching out and there would always be someone listening, someone to listen. They did listen, along with others, as I told my version of what had happened in St. Helena, how difficult it was to fight with the air, the darkness, and they all offered me, in his or her own way, the same advice. It's over now. Get on with your work and your life. They were trying to be kind. I remained silent about the drive-bys. There was nothing they could do, so why distress them? I don't remember exactly when I picked up the pattern of the drive-bys, but I did. On a street as quiet as mine, it's more than possible that you could walk the 2 blocks to the 7th Avenue and not to see a single car. Sometimes one or two of them were there and down the street. It was never free of traffic. Minutes after leaving my door, there would be 2 or 3 cars coming down the street. It was every day and constant. If I went out at 7 for a paper, they were there. If I went out at noon for lunch, they were there. If I was going to meet a friend for a movie at night, they were there. I assumed it was not their way of telling me that I was not alone, that I was still being watched. And although I fought it, I was becoming paranoid. They watched me when I left my apartment. Were they also watching me inside my home? Were there cameras in the bedroom? Bugs in the living room? I walked from room to room wondering. I fought the urge to lift up the pictures or feel beneath the furniture, looking for cameras and bugs. I knew that to start on the road was to slip into madness. If devices were planted around my house, there was no sane way to find out except by hiring professionals. With my phone tapped, they would know when a technician was coming in enough time to slip back into my home and remove the devices. So I was miserable when I left my home and miserable when I returned to it. New York was not proving to be the sanctuary that I had hoped it would be, but it was all I had left. So I dug down deep and held on for all it was worth. Dick Simon is beyond furious. When he gets this angry, an icy fist forms in the middle of his stomach. Regardless of which way he turns his body, it jabs him in the middle, actually producing physical pain. There have been only a few times in his life when he'd been in this condition, but he's pushed them far back in his memory. He takes the glass globe from his desk and squeezes it in his hand, fighting the urge to fling it through the plate glass window. He closes his eyes and takes 2 or 3 deep breaths, hoping to relieve the stranglehold on his insides. It helps a bit, but then he has to open his eyes to stare ahead at his computer screen and cause of this anguish. Gloria Naylor's file. It's the latest entry has an inquiry from the CIA about ongoing surveillance. Someone she's talked to in New York mattered enough to get an inquiry like this pushed through. It isn't classified. It isn't even an official inquiry, just an unofficial request for information. It's enough to send his head spinning. If he ignores the request, it might be repeated as an official memo, and he'll have no memos about her coming across his desk. Who could it have been? Her file holds the names of everyone she's spoken to in New York, everyone she's visited, or even drank a cup of coffee with. It's easy enough to run those names and see which one might have ties to the CIA, but that isn't a real issue. The real issue is that someone is listening to her and believing what she says, believing her enough to make a few phone calls, pull a few strings. Or maybe one of her friends has friends with the connections to do this. There's no telling. It's like a spider web that keeps branching off into any number of possible scenarios. The easier thing to do, a smart thing, is to go back to the source of the web, find the spider, and destroy it. At the crutch of his new mess, it's her credibility. Someone believes her. So you go in a little deeper and give her things to talk about that would make her seem like a lunatic. Instead of calling the CIA, this friend would be encouraging her to seek professional help. Simon closes the Naylor file. Her file is in the second vault. The invisible. He turns his attention to the third vault on his screen. The impossible. This vault only opens with a thumbprint. He presses his thumb on the graphic of a lock and the door swings open. Welcome, Richard Simon, the screen reads. You have access up to level 3. Indicate level. Simon types in level 1. That he thinks should be more than enough to drive her crazy. The boys are told that a new team will be arriving the next day. They are bringing in equipment and specialists to train them for a new phase of the operation. That's all Sullivan will tell them, except that this phase will be held highly classified. They hate to see the way he gloats because for another 24 hours he knows something they don't. The man is pond scum. Paolo tells the others. This highly classified bullcrap won't boil down to anything new or exciting. They soon find out that they can't be more wrong. Agent Brown comes to them directly from the office, and he could have stepped out of central casting for a James Bond movie. Lean and mean with sunglasses that he never takes off. The tall agent never smiles, and you get the sense that he never smiled, even as a child. In a no-nonsense fashion, he tells them that he's there to teach them how to use the equipment that he's unpacking from his huge attaché case. The first thing he took out looked like some satellite dish, but it's small and light enough to be held in one hand. The second thing made Hallam catch his breath. fully equipped computer that doesn't weigh more than 8 ounces and can be held in Agent Brown's other hand. He plugs the satellite dish into computer's docking station. Now, he says, a brief demonstration. Paulo is told to turn on the dish, and a dull hum is heard in the room. Now, Agent Brown says, aim the dish toward my head and type in any word into the computer. Paulo types in, hello. You typed hello, Agent Brown says. Now type in a whole sentence, Paulo types. Agent Brown still has his back to Paulo. You typed, bring me the keys to the kingdom, Brown says. And how do I know? I heard it. He taps his forehead. I know what you're probably thinking, and believe me, this is no magic trick. You have in your hands some of the most advanced technology in the world. We've known for a couple of decades that sound can be produced in someone's head by radiating it with microwaves. It's now been refined to work with this computer program. This program translates keystrokes into bursts of microwaves that bypass the ears and hit the auditory section of the brain. You are, in effect, speaking directly to the brain, and the brain hears you. For all the target knows, she's just had a fleeting thought that originated within her. The room is totally quiet for a moment as the boys take in the significance of what they're being told. Paulo is the first to speak. What's the vocabulary range? 72,000 words, Agent Brown answers. And it works through walls? Hallam asks. Within 50 feet of the microwave dish. These apartments are 50 feet deep, Ricky says, so she's never out of range, no matter where she goes. That's true, Agent Brown says. But you're in a safe house with civilians. I'd suggest that you limit it to her bedroom on the other side of this wall. These people will start asking too many questions if you're running all over their house with a satellite dish. This is going to be terrific, Paulo says. She'll be bouncing off the walls. It can be an effective tool, Brown says, but there are procedures you have to follow, and you have to keep a record of everything you say to her for your reports. The computer will keep its own records, but that goes into a file that you can't access. Are there any more questions? And we can say anything to her? As long as it falls within those 72,000 words, and you'll read about this later in a procedure file. But I'll tell you now, no matter what you say to her, it must never be the truth. The point of this phase of the operation is to get internal conflict going within the target. You should have gathered enough intelligence by now to have plenty of material to draw from. For example, if you found out over the last few months that she has political leanings that are at odds with the present administration, you could say to her, I should buy a gun and kill Bill Clinton. Always keep it in the first person, so she'll believe the thoughts are coming from her own head. But how do we know if it's working? Paulo asks. Because, Agent Brown says, she'll be begging for friends to recommend a good psychiatrist. For me, the hardest part of this story began then. Did I lose my mind in the summer of 1996? It certainly felt like it. I tried to take the advice of friends and get back to work, but it was difficult to concentrate. Writing a book is harder than most people realize, even for a professional. I had my research material all lined up, but I would read 1 or 2 pages and my mind would drift, always back to the surveillance. I don't know what bothered me the most, the surveillance or the fact that they had the ability to hack into my computer. I had to accept that every thought I wrote down was possibly monitored. It was like living my life in a glass cage at the zoo. People I hadn't invited into my life had entered anyway and were watching my every move. After a week, I gave up trying to read my research material. Maybe I was pushing myself too hard. Maybe I should just give myself a rest for a while. I started channel surfing on the television, going from movie to movie. When I felt I'd run out of good movies, I turned to my own video collection. I did this for hours at a time, just wanting to escape deeper and deeper into myself. I remember I was watching Mel Gibson's Braveheart for the 15th time when the thought when the first thought came to me. I'm a bitch. It seemed to have just floated up from the bottom of my mind. It had nothing to do with what I was thinking because at that moment I wasn't thinking at all. I had been watching a particular gory battle scene. I'm the worst bitch in the world. I want to kill myself. Where was this stuff coming from? I frowned and rubbed my forehead. Why was I thinking these things? This wasn't me. Thought came that hit me to the heart. I hate Jews. This was something I had been wrestling with since leaving St. Helena's. Jews weren't the only people making up my surveillance, but they had been the first. It hurt me to see them working together to make my life miserable when I had done nothing to them. I didn't think that I hated them, but I did fear them now. I guess there's an element of hatred in anything that we fear. But no, I wasn't going to go down that path. I had been fighting hard to be anti Semitic, so why would I think that I hate Jews? I'm a bitch. I want to kill myself. Dear God, I thought, I'm going crazy. And then, just as the thoughts came, they left. That is, until I got ready to go to bed. I just settled in under the covers when the thought came. I hope I die in my sleep. If this doesn't stop, I thought, I'm going to have to get some help. Bitch. I'm going to straight I'm going straight to the first psychiatrist I can find. I had been under therapy back in my 20s when I was going through a particular hard time, but a part of me always thought of it as self-indulgent. What people will do who did not have health insurance or the money to spend on a psychiatrist? Well, they just muddled through using their inner strength and a dose of common sense. If they had a supportive family or good friends, they talked to them for a lot less than $200 an hour. I want to kill myself. I didn't need psychoanalysts. What I needed was some sort of medication. I'd been through a lot in 1996, enough to throw anybody's brain off track. I'm a bitch. A chemical imbalance. It was some sort of chemical imbalance in my brain that was bringing these thoughts. I have no friends. Everybody hates me like I hate Jews. I could ignore them and maybe they'd go away, or I could, for once in my life, stop trying to be Wonder Woman, toughing this out alone. I told myself it was okay to ask for help if I needed it. And this seemed to be one of those times. I knew deep down that I wasn't crazy, but if these voices kept on, I would be. I lasted almost 2 weeks before I called my doctor and made an appointment. 2 weeks of being bombarded, mostly at night, with dirty names and messages to kill myself. It was a great relief when it was time for my appointment. I liked Dr. Beston. She was a no nonsense type of person with a gentle and kind heart. When I talked, she really listened, and I got the sense that no matter how many patients were in the living room, I was the center of her world for that moment. After she examined me, I took a deep breath and told her about the voices and strange thoughts that kept popping into my head. It was the first time I had voiced these concerns out loud, and my heart was beating fast. I was afraid that she would think I was crazy. It was the same fear that had kept me from confiding in my family or friends. There was concern in her large brown eyes, and she gently placed her hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, she said. We'll fix this. Her touch was so soothing it brought tears to my eyes. She recommended a colleague of hers who said she was a very good psychiatrist and would give me the medication that I needed. She made the appointment herself before I left her office. I felt elated as I left. I had finally taken some steps to get myself help. The weather outside was beautiful. It was one of those rare August days in New York that weren't humid. I treated myself to a nice lunch and walked for a while. My head had been clear of the voices since I left the house, and they weren't plaguing me now. It came to me that I never heard the voices when I was outside of the house, and I wondered why. There was no telling. The brain is a complicated thing, I thought, and maybe now I would get some help in unraveling it. Dr. Davis worked out of a suite of offices on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. He was one of those rare psychiatrists who didn't take August off. A tall man with nut brown skin and prematurely graying hair, he moved with the grace of a dancer as he extended his hand to shake mine and invite me into his office. Once you looked past the gray sideburns, it was clear that he was a barely 30. What he lacked in age, he made up for in his manner. There was something about him that put me at ease immediately. He was like the overstuffed leather sofa in his office. You sank into a softness, but there were still springs holding you up. After an initial awkwardness, I opened my mouth and began to talk. It all came pouring out of me, the experiences in St. Helena, the surveillance, the harassment with slamming doors. When I first returned to New York, and finally the voices that kept pushing thoughts into my mind. His gentle eyes never left mine except to take a few notes on a yellow pad. I know I'm not crazy, I concluded. So, where are these thoughts coming from? He told me that the brain is one vast electrical field that is constantly sending messages between nerve cells. But sometimes, for various reasons, that systems break down and a lot of irregularities occur. One such is hearing voices. It doesn't mean that a person is crazy, it's just an imbalance in the brain's chemicals. It can usually be corrected quite well with medication. Schizophrenia is no disgrace. A lot of Americans suffer from it. He recommended that I see him once a week for the next few months. He wanted to monitor the effect of the medication, and there were issues I needed to resolve about my experiences of the past year. You've been through a lot, he told me. Many people would have broken down long ago under your kind of pressure. Did I have good family support? I told him that I was single without any children, but I was close to my mother and two sisters who now lived in North Carolina. My mother had been widowed for 3 years after my father died in his sleep from a heart attack. At first, I told her about the surveillance, but little else. I saw how distressed it made her, so why keep burdening her with these things that she could do little about? I felt the same way about my sisters, so, for the most part, I was battling this thing alone. Well, you don't have to be alone anymore, he said. If you're willing to take advantage of it, you have me. A flood of relief washed over me. I wanted to sit on that sofa and cry, just trying to survive day by day. I hadn't realized the kind of pressure I was living with. It had been a lifelong problem with me, rarely asking for help. I always thought of myself as a strong person, fearing that if I shared too much of a problem with family or friends, I was whining. In my relationships, I was always the one who listened, not the one who complained. I was talking even less over the phone. I believed that my phone was tapped, and airing my grievances would just give them a measure of how they were succeeding in disrupting my life. Very slowly, I was building a wall between myself and family and friends. Now, Dr. Davis was offering me a way out. Talk to me, he says. Talk to me, and whatever you say will stay in this office. For the next several weeks, I took him at his word. I spoke about all the things I had pushed down inside me in order to live a measure of my life sanely. The rage that would wash over me from knowing that they were hacking into my computer as I used it. The despair from knowing that I was being followed into supermarkets, drugstores, or on a walk in the park. The doubt that I now had about friendship, knowing that they had the power to infiltrate my life and use my friends as operatives for their cause. And the shame that I was becoming anti Semitic because of the involvement of Jews in all this. We spent a lot of time on that issue because I was still going to bed at night with the chorus of, I hate Jews, resounding in my head. Wasn't the medicine supposed to take all of that away? He said he would increase the dosage, but hadn't I said that I only heard the voices when I was watching television in my bedroom or retiring for the night? Perhaps it was better to stay at that dosage and give the medicine a chance to kick in fully. He would rather err on the side of caution than rush over and medicate me. The voices will go away, he said. Let's use a little patience. I trusted Dr. Davis, so I didn't push the issue. But he turned out to be wrong. Things didn't get better, they got worse. The boys decide to take over the fall semester. The boys decide to take the fall semester off in order to stay with the operation. There is finally a little movement. They must be getting to the witch because she's seeing a psychiatrist. They have little else to go on because she never speaks to her family or friends about hearing voices. If it were them, they'd be bouncing off the walls by now. They hate to admit it, but there is a grudging respect for her strength growing within the operation. One agent on duty even had the nerve to say, "When are we going to leave this woman alone and go on to something important? How many times can you call someone a bitch?" The boys made sure that Sullivan heard about the remark and that the agent left with a memo on his file and whispers of demotion. This was enough of a warning for the rest of them. Just do what you're told, or your history. The orders of this for this operation came from the top, and their job was to follow them until they were told to close up shop. Not getting feedback from the Naylor woman was like flying without instruments into a fog. There was little by which they could measure the success of the operation. She wasn't using her computer or writing about the voices. She wasn't talking on the phone. So what could they do? They know the key is with that shrink. They know how much she trusts him because she told friends on the phone. He's helping her to get to the bottom of issues, and that could only be the voices. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe he's giving her the encouragement to be a bigger pain in the ass than she already is. With the operation stymied for a few weeks, Sullivan agrees with the boys that it's now time to send in a couple of field agents to talk with her shrink. They'd run his background and hadn't found anything he could be blackmailed with. He was gay, but out of the closet. So there went that. They hoped that the fear factor would weigh in. It's amazing how many people crumble as soon as you flash a government ID at them. Families talk, priests talk, even shrinks talk. This time they will go in with both guns blazing at themselves. The National Security Agency. Most people, even professionals, didn't know what in the hell the NSA is or does, so the ignorance helped to cover a lot of lies. Once they found out that half of what you told them wasn't true, you would have already gotten your information and gone. Then what were they going to do? Sue? Dr. Davis is not proving to be an easy mark. He actually reads the badges of two of the agents who show up at his office door. They do see that glimpse of fear that they're used to, but the doctor is cautious and guarded. They tell him that they're on the official business and would appreciate it if the doctor treated their conversation as classified. Dr. Davis nods and sits there patiently, waiting for them to continue. The younger agent takes charge of the conversation while the older one glances around the room. "It's about a patient of yours, Gloria Naylor," the young agent says. "Yes?" It's clear that Dr. Davis isn't going to give up any information voluntarily. "This is a very delicate matter, Dr. Davis, one of the top of national security, and we'd appreciate your help with it." "How can I help?" "We'd like a copy of the notes you've taken or any tape recordings of her visit with you." "That's out of the question. My files are confidential." "We understand that, but you would be doing your government a great service if you could see your way clear to." "How did you know she was seeing me?" "Sir?" "How did you know that she's a patient of mine?" The younger agent smiles. "We're the National Security Agency, Dr. Davis. Surely you know the answer to that one." "Well, here's something I don't know. Why? Why do you want my notes?" "If I could tell you, I would, but as I've said, it's a matter of top national security. I'm going to be brutally honest with you, gentlemen. I don't believe one word of what you've told me." "That we're from the National Security Agency?" "That this business has anything at all to do with national security. And so I believe this conversation is over. We came in here in good faith, Doctor, so you can leave in the same way." The older agent finally speaks. "There are ways to get your cooperation." "Are you threatening me?" "Just try to be helpful," the older agent says. "You don't want us as enemies, Dr. Davis." "What I want for you is to leave my office." This conversation is over, gentlemen. As they rise to go, the younger agent produces a card that he gives to Dr. Davis, just in case you change your mind. The card is blank, except for a name and a number. Dr. Davis is trembling inside as he closes the door on the two agents. He takes a deep breath to calm himself and sits down in his chair. Gloria Naylor is right. She is being watched. Some of the things she said, which he'd classified as paranoid, would need reevaluation. There was something they wanted that phone taps and computer hacking wasn't giving them. He could only guess that it was a reaction. Otherwise, why come to him? She was not responding sufficiently to some action of theirs. But what action could that be? The surveillance? The drive-bys? What wasn't she talking about except to him? Of course, the voices. She had often expressed her fear that people might think her mentally unbalanced if she told them about the voices in her head. But how would the NSA know about her internal thoughts? Could she have mentioned it to at least one friend or family member? Could it be from her prescriptions? Haldol was commonly used for schizophrenia. Dr. Davis doesn't think about the unthinkable, that they knew about the voices because they'd put them there. The only thing he knows is that he must protect his patient. Maybe he is being foolish going head to head with NSA, but right is right. When she comes in the next week, he doesn't tell her about the visit he's had. That's his problem, not hers. Her problem is to find a way to get on with her life in spite of the surveillance and whatever other games they're playing. He tells her that she must pull from her inner strength, and believe it or not, she'd had a lot of it. Don't disregard what kept you going under months of pressure. You're a writer, he tells her, so cut off the television and write. He feels that it was a good session because she leaves in good spirits. There is a break between patients, so he opens his mail. In the pile is a letter from the IRS informing him that they want to audit his taxes for the last 3 years. He knows without a doubt that this is tied to the visit from the National Security Agency. This is punishment for saying no. Well, if this is the worst they can do, he thinks, then I got off pretty easy. Then it hits him what had been bothering him about that visit. They let go too easily, much too easily. He didn't want to be paranoid, but he's found himself in a set of circumstances that might demand a little paranoia. How else might they get the information they wanted from him? Tapping his phone would only give them limited information, so he rules that out. But bugging his office was a definite possibility. He looks around at the stuffed sofa, the wall-to-wall bookcases, the side tables and lamps. There is no end to the places where they could have planted a bug in his office. He decides to call his little brother. Dr. Davis uses his colleague's telephone to put in a call to his brother, who is a private investigator working out of a large agency based in Jersey City. Their main focus is corporate crime, and he's heard no end to stories about the sweeps they do to make sure that the secret negotiations are kept just that way. They work with some of the most advanced technology available. It takes his brother a little less than 10 minutes to find the bug that had been placed underneath the side table. This is high-end stuff, the brother tells him. Whoever's after you doesn't mind spending big bucks. Do you know who it could be? No, he tells them. I have no idea at all. Well, not to worry, his brother says. I'll do weekly sweeps for a while to make sure that you stay clean, but usually when they get found out, they resort to other tactics. Dr. Davis hopes that doesn't mean they'll break in and steal the files while tossing the place to make it look like vandalism. He decides that he'll keep the Naylor files at home for a while in his safe. He heaves a deep sigh. How did he manage to get in the middle of this mess? Dick Simon is determined to have a quiet meal at home. He will not think, as he's been thinking for every day of the last week about Gloria Naylor. He tosses himself a light salad with goat cheese and sun-dried tomatoes and breaks out a good bottle of Chardonnay. He turns on the radio, which stays at his favorite station of light jazz. He takes a moment to look around at his living room. It's almost monastic in its design. Everything is modern and sparse. He likes the simplicity of his home. The eyes don't have to work hard to appreciate the clean lines of the coffee table, the curve of the couch. He takes a bite of his salad, perfect, and a good swallow of his wine. He finishes the first glass quickly and pours himself another. He can feel the tension leaving his spine and the back of his neck. The thought comes to him involuntarily. Stupid pills. That's what they were taking up in New York. Stupid pills. It's the only way to explain yet another botched operation. His hand tightens around the wine glass. He's not going to think about that now, but who is he kidding? The woman, this operation is like a thorn in his side. He remembers seeing a nature program on television where a lion was driving himself crazy, trying to gnaw at a thorn bush that was sending splinters into his back paw. The animal circled and raged until he fell into a frenzy. Half crazed, the lion became a danger to his mates and even to his cubs. He was not going to be like some dumb animal running into the forest and ranting out of his head because of incompetence in New York. The shrink found the bug. He shakes his head in disbelief. The damn shrink found the damn bug that shouldn't have been there in the first damn place. They wanted feedback, the boys had whined. Well, you get that by the intelligence you accumulate. Are her activities decreasing? Is she closing herself off from family and friends? Is there a depressed tone in her voice when she speaks on the phone? Does she speak on the phone at all? Are friends calling her or is she calling them? Any number of ways you could tell if a person was losing touch with her world. Is she or is she spending all day in front of the television? All of that and more could tell you what you wanted to know, unless you were overdosing on stupid pills. Sullivan was going to have to go. Someone's head needed to roll in light of the new debacle. Simon fears that he's going to have to take over the operation himself. He would hate that because it would mean he had made an error in judgment when appointing the current field coordinator, and he never made errors in judgment. But there it was, looming inside of him, the bottom. One slip, one lousy slip is all it takes. But no, it hadn't been his error. It was Sullivan's. Sullivan's had come highly recommended, pulled from an A list. Simon had nothing to do with making up that list. If there was fault, it lay with whoever that was. When the heat came, if the heat came, it could be directed that way. He looks down at his salad and realizes he's lost his appetite. He dumps it in the garbage, takes the wine to the sofa, and sits down. He leans back, closes his eyes, and lets the music wash over him. If you don't get the results you want from level 1, he thinks, you move to level 2. And level 2 was serious business. Level 2 could easily run someone out of their mind. It would be just what she deserves. Wasn't she running him crazy? Hadn't he had a moment's peace since her name first came across his desk? He curses Eunice for bringing this all to him. He should have known that anything connected to his sister had the potential for a disaster. She was content down there in St. Helena with the Naylor woman gone, but now Naylor had become a thorn in his side. He listens for a while to Kenny G doing what wasn't humanly possible with a saxophone and thinks about his own power. He has the technology in hand to do the impossible. If he unleashes that power, no one would believe her as she goes quietly and totally insane. It's nothing. He wouldn't feel guilty about it because she'd brought it on herself. She and whatever friend was sending him requests from the CIA. She and this shrink who thinks he's Dick Tracy. No, she has no one to blame for this but herself. Kicking the operation up to level 2 means that he will have to make a trip to New York. The boys need to understand the seriousness of what they'd now be doing. He wonders if they were the ones who talked Sullivan into planting a bug in the shrink's office. It smacks of something they would do, but Sullivan was the one in charge. He should have known better. So what to do now? Pick another field coordinator from the A list or wing it himself. He decides that he'll be in charge for a while. If level 2 was handled properly, There would be no operation left after the next few months. And we're going to stop there. That's page 110.